Hello, and welcome to the Moms Love Coaching Podcast, where we talk about self-care from the inside out for moms. I'm your host, Carrie McFarland, along with Angie Turgeon-Ledoux. We are certified life coaches and moms, and in this podcast, we'll go beyond the take a spa day advice and talk about real and sustainable ways that you can feel better, be happier, and stay out of overwhelm and burnout. You spend your life taking care of everyone else. In this podcast, each week, it's all about you taking care of you with no guilt and no apologies. We're so happy that you've decided to spend this time with us, so go ahead and grab your favorite cup of coffee, find a comfortable place, and get ready to spend the next 30 minutes focusing on the most important person in your life, you. Hello, welcome to Self-Care from the Inside Out, Moms Love Coaching. This is Carrie McFarland and Angie Turgeon-Ledoux coming at you this morning, Sunday morning. It is bright and sunny today. I was so happy that it was sunny out yesterday that I got up and I took the dog for a walk at 7:30 in the morning because I just wanted to be outside.
It looks chilly out today, and my weather app sent me a little message, bundle up, but the sun does make a huge difference. So up here anyway.
I noticed that the days are getting longer.
Yes.
Well, not that the days are getting longer, but you know what I mean. The light is longer.
Yeah. Makes me wonder what's happening with daylight savings time.
Who knows?
Are we changing it? Is it going to be permanent? Yeah.
They've been debating that for a million. I mean, that's been happening. That debate's been happening. I remember since I was little, I've been hearing that debate.
Yeah.
So I don't think
pretty close. Yeah.
That's not our topic today.
No, it isn't. It's fun.
We could talk about it though. But today I wanted to talk about radical responsibility and how it relates to your self-care. If you think about your self-care, the way we try to explain it as self-care from the inside out, and self-care is not a to-do list. It's more of an identity. It's more of an attitude. It's how you think about yourself. It's how you prioritize yourself and the ways in which you do that. So radical responsibility, the goal of that is to take full control of your life. And this isn't about blame or fault. If something happens in your life, you take responsibility. So what that means is you take control of what you can do and in all situations. But if something happens to you and you feel like you're a victim, then you feel powerless and you are not taking responsibility for what you can do in either that moment or the moments after or in future moments going forward in your life. It's a little tricky when you think of it like that, because I'm not saying that things don't happen to people, but what I'm saying is if you can get yourself to the place where you always take responsibility, no matter what, even if something isn't your fault, then you're always in control. And that means that you can always go towards the outcome that you want to go in. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And it makes me think about a situation, a story a friend was telling me. And she was driving back home after having picked her children up from school. And somebody ran a stop sign, pulled right out in front of her, and she T-boned the car. Nobody was injured, but cars were seriously injured. And if any of y'all know about trying to get a car body work on a car right now, it takes forever. And so she was talking about the struggles of, trying to get to replace the car and all that. And she was struggling with this very concept, even though she wasn't aware that's what she was doing. But, like she said, I could have a car. And she's like, screaming at the other driver, what were you thinking? You ran the stop sign, blah, blah, blah. Of course, she responded that way because she must have been scared out of her wits. As she started to talk more about it, what you're saying is that initial emotional response is your human response. I was scared, and I am, and from many of that comes out in the words and in our actions. But then there's a moment you can acknowledge the emotion you're having. I'm scared. And then you kind of come back to yourself. in that kind of very immediate, dangerous situation. You want to react to your adrenaline, right? You want to react
Correct.
to the emotional, to the physical messages in your body that tell you to fight, flight, or, flock, the reactions that you have. But then at some point you realize it lasts what, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, the chemical response
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
in your body to something like that. When you get, I guess my daughter would call it being triggered. It's at the moment that you realize you're holding your breath, you take a breath, and then you say, where can I take responsibility for this? Not so that other people don't have to take responsibility, but we have a concept in my work called your circle of control. Radical responsibility is saying, this is what I can control right now. So then in that situation, my friend called 911, got the insurance. She started, talking with her children, those sorts of things. And then she proceeded to problem solve. The idea of focusing on your radical responsibility, and maybe it's the word responsibility that people can get back on. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I mean, you can call it whatever you want. To me, I think of it as never being a victim, because
Right.
if I'm a victim, then I'm not in control of anything that happens. Everything just happens to me and I have no control at all. I can't do anything about it. That puts you in a mental space that you give up. You don't think it can be better. And so you just accept things as they are. And then things could stay the same or things could get worse. But if you identify as a victim, well, I mean, I have lots of thoughts on that word. Remember in one of the podcasts, I think the first one we talked about, I said, there are some words on this planet that I want to get rid of. And I think victim is one of them. I don't think that word serves anybody.
Right.
It doesn't serve anybody. It puts somebody in the weaker position, and nobody should ever have to feel that they are in the weaker position, even if something has happened that would, in this society, label them a victim. I just don't think it serves anybody. The radical responsibility, it just gives you back that control. It opens up your mind to, what can I do? What are the things I can do? Victimhood just kind of like shuts you down. The radical responsibility opens you up to curiosity and what can I do? There might be some things that you can't do logistically or physically or financially, and that's fine. There's always going to be those things, but there's always something that you can do. And what is that? I would say that what you can do isn't always what you want to do. It's not the same thing. So I'm not talking about what you would want to do. Right. I'm talking about what you can do to keep yourself in control of the situation. So in the example of your friend, you're right. It is 100% human to start, now I have to do this and now I have to do that. And right. But the other side of that statement is, I shouldn't have to do this. Right. I shouldn't have to do that. This shouldn't have happened to me. That is another form of being a victim, not taking responsibility. And I don't say that in a way that's demeaning or judgmental or anything like that. When I say responsibility, I'm saying control. I would want to empower people to always feel like they are in control of what they can do next. They're not always in control of what's happening around them. She couldn't control that car hit her. Right.
Or she hit that car because they pulled out in front of her.
Right. She can't really control that. She can't control what the other car does. So the other car went in front of her unexpectedly, and physics. The car is not going to slow down. Right. So she can't control physics.
Right.
But now that it's happened, there are things that she can do. Again, she may not want to do them. And that's completely understandable. And that's where the compassion comes in. Yeah, this is hard. This is, not something that you expected. Empathizing that way and having compassion that way, and even having compassion for yourself, I didn't expect that I was going to have to do this. This feels hard to me. This, whatever, this feels frustrating to whatever it is that you're feeling, just have compassion, but always with the mindset of, I didn't expect this to happen to me. And there are things I can do now to take back control of the situation. When I think of radical responsibility in terms of self-care, keeping yourself in control of what you are doing next in your life is one of the highest forms of self-care. Keeping yourself out of victimhood, keeping yourself in control. That is the kind of self-care that we're talking about. And that's why we say self-care isn't a to-do list. Self-care is an identity, right? So these are the kinds of things, when we talk about self-care from the inside out, this is exactly what we're talking about. This is something that you can do to always keep yourself in control and to keep that mindset of that you are the highest priority. And so what are the things that you can do next, no matter what is happening around you, that keeps that intact?
I think about, the accident situation, or even if I have a story about when your child gets injured and they want to panic. And as their mom, you explain, you might like, let's walk over here. Let's get a washcloth. You talk to them in a way to help them stay calm and out of the panic that they may feel in a threatening situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that radical responsibility is talking to yourself that way. Is talking to
Yes.
yourself of, that was scary. That everybody's okay. It's all going to be fine. But well, maybe it won't be, but you can handle it. It's that sort of thing. I got through that initial reaction. That's over. That's past. I can't change that now. How do I want to show up in this situation? And you're probably not going to walk through those thoughts in that situation. But the more you practice it in other situations, the more that's going to surface. But
Mm-hmm.
I can bet that moms have been in a situation where their kiddo has been hurt and they have had to be the one that is calm and in control of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was nobody else to do it. And getting hysterical with the kiddo is probably
even if not. Yeah. Right. And we've done that too.
Faint,
I mean, I know I have.
The sight of blood. Yeah, you faint at the sight of blood and you're the only adult in the situation. You're going to figure out a way to come to.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you're going to figure out a way. Don't pass out. Don't pass out.
Right.
When you were talking about that example, I thought of something that happened when my daughter was, she was probably about 5 because my youngest was little. So we were at a friend's pool and she had floaties on her arms. And I was right there. I was watching her. And, there was other parents in the neighborhood around, right? So there were kids in the pool. And she hated her floaties. Like, she just hated them, but she needed them. So I made her wear them. But unbeknownst to me, because as I was talking to another mom and probably for 20 seconds didn't have my eyes directly on her, she took her floaties off in the pool, in the deep end. Right? I mean, I was like,
yeah, Miss Independent is headed to the bottom of the pool.
Yes. So now when I saw her, now she's like kind of flailing. And it took me a second to figure out what was going on. Honestly, I don't even know what happened after that, but somehow we got her to the edge of the pool and pulled her out, right? So she never really went under, a little bit, but I pulled her out of the pool and I completely flipped out. I was like not necessarily on her, but I went crazy. I was like yelling and swearing and just, oh my God. Like, not at anybody, but like,
you're panicking.
Oh my, like, I was just freaking out. And it took me a while to like calm down. And then like even later on that night, I just kept thinking about it and I couldn't sleep. And I was like, what if? That is a perfect example of what I'm talking about, because I allowed myself to completely lose control. It put me in a state of panic well beyond when the incident happened. So like into the next morning, even into the next day. In my mind, that was sort of a victim situation to me. Like, I was the victim of what had happened in terms of like how it was making me feel. Like I couldn't help it. I couldn't help how that was making me feel now.
Right.
Instead of taking responsibility for calming myself down, not for the initial reaction, right? Everybody's going to have
Right.
that, like when they see her in the pool, right? Not taking responsibility for settling myself or calming myself down or thinking through it logically afterwards, or not taking responsibility for allowing myself to like have that fear come through and process through, right? Because I didn't know any of this coaching stuff then. I had no idea.
Right.
So I let myself get into a complete tizzy, which affected people around me and affected my daughter and affected the way that I was thinking and the way that I felt. And I didn't want to feel that way. That could have been a good moment for radical responsibility had I known about all of this at that time, which I did not. But that would be a good example of taking radical responsibility for something that is not necessarily in your control in the moment, but how you handle yourself and how you take care of yourself. What are your next steps, right? There's always something that you can do to take back control, no matter what it is. And I think that's what came up for me when you talked about, you know, when your kids get injured type of thing.
Well, I do want to make sure that we distinguish between what could possibly be a trauma reaction, right? So if you have a past experience, who knows, say for example, that the child, you did experience a near drowning yourself or with another child, your initial reaction could be is instinctual, right? And you can go right to that survivor brain. So in Carrie's situation, Carrie, when you were in that situation, you could have gone to a therapist and said, well, I really want to unpack why I responded that way. And you could have thought about, you know, how come that stuck with me? And, you know, we're not therapists, but in coaching, what we talk about is how you move forward from it. So what you were noticing in that situation is that adrenaline, the chemicals that were in your body from that initial reaction, took days to really dissipate. And then your brain kept going back to that, all what could have happened. And you've also talked about your own anxiety when your kids were little, right? It's completely understandable. And you didn't have the skills to say, all right, this is what's happening. You didn't have the skill and the knowledge to understand why your brain was responding that way. And then this is where, if you understood radical responsibility, you could have had that. It's just that tiniest of distances, right? From what's happening in your brain physically and with your thoughts. And then that tiny bit of awareness where you could have said, okay, this is where I breathe now.
Right.
This is where I recognize that I have been screaming the last 5 minutes. I'm, you know, and my daughter's looking at me like I am a crazy woman with 10, and, you know, I'm scaring the other kids in the pool. It's really a process. I guess what I'm saying is it's a process. You didn't know how to help yourself feel better in that moment. Now, do we want to be scared when we see our kids in a life-threatening situation? Absolutely, because that adrenaline rush is what causes us to take action, causes people to move to that kid, move her out of the pool, and make sure she's not hurt. You said it. I lost my mind. That's exactly what it's like when you're in that flight, fight, or I can never remember, fight or flight.
Or freeze.
Or freeze. And then flock is the fourth one they've added, that where you like want to gather together with other people. Flight, fight, or freeze is the ones that many of us have had situations with. And we're not talking about that initial chemical response that happens in your body. Although I do think that you know people where, I mean, I can use Ben and I as an example. A story where one of our kiddos got her arm pinched in between the footrest of the recliner, it was up. And if
Oh,
you look up, they're like 2-inch metal and springs and things, and you're like,
yeah.
holy crap, her arm's gonna get amputated. He knew he couldn't handle it. He knew that he was getting too triggered and scared, like the adrenaline in him. So it was my role in that moment to calmly figure out, like, just to calm the child and make sure we could figure out how to remove the arm without injuring her. It all worked out fine, but if I remember correctly, probably 10 or 15 minutes after that was when I had the adrenaline rush. So it's like
Mhm.
I was able to stay level-headed in the situation, and not because of any particular skill set, just because it was like, and I'm sure you've got situations like this too. You knew in that situation in the pool, there were other people around, right?
Mhm.
Had you been the only one there with her in the pool,
Yeah,
the losing your mind probably would have happened after,
it's a good
right?
point.
So it's just it's understanding how we respond to fear. It's a fear response. I mean,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, it
then
is a
being
fear.
kind to yourself afterward if you're
Right.
like
Right.
trying to get yourself under, that high, I think it's cortisol also, that's in goes into your bloodstream
Stress
with
hormone.
adrenaline.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's your body's way of, the raising your voice, the screaming, that's your body's way of trying to regulate yourself again, trying to get yourself back to a state of calm, because the brain, as we know, likes calm, likes to
Mhm.
be not stressed, likes the easy thing. And when
Mhm.
you're in that situation, all those hormones are like fighting to try
Right.
to get you to.
Yeah. I mean, and the problem with that is sort of like, at least for me, when you start yelling, you give permission to yourself to do that. And so when things like that happen, it's sort of now become your habit response, right?
Yes.
It's what you know, so
Yeah.
you keep doing it. And what happens is you end up feeling terrible, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of, right? I
Mhm.
mean, it's sort of like overeating in my mind, right? It's like it feels
Mhm.
good in the moment, but then
Yep.
afterwards you have regret and it feels terrible.
Well, you've had
Um,
that moment where I'm sure where you've like the kids have done something and then you go into your spouse and you say, I or somebody at work does something and you're like, I need,
yeah,
and you're like, okay, now I can go be human again.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean,
We do
yeah,
that with our kids too. Like, I
yeah,
need to, you sit right here and don't move.
yeah,
Back, and you get yourself to get, and then you say, huh, I took care of myself good in that moment. We can't always do it. We just don't always have the skill set because
yeah,
it is definitely learned and practiced. But we get
yeah.
plenty of practice.
We
We get
get plenty of
plenty of
practice when you have
opportunities to
kids.
practice.
Yeah,
You
kids
do, you
are
do.
kids are our best teachers. That's what I've found
For
out. They're
sure.
the
Yep.
right. I mean, it's inevitable and it's forced. It's like it's forced growth. I think we talked about that before. It's like forced growth. You can't not grow because your kids are going to push you in that direction no matter what. But I want to talk a little bit about, the trauma response, or
Mm-hmm.
recognizing if it's a trauma response and not having the tools to take radical responsibility. Like, when that happened with my daughter, I had no idea about coaching and I didn't know anything about that. And so I would just let my emotions take over and I would just feel awful all the time. And I guess the reason that I wanted to talk about this today is not to say you should do this and you should have been doing this all along, and right, it's not about that. It's about learning from our experiences, and also, I think, I edit these podcasts and I go back and listen to them. And I think in every single one, I talk about how it's a process. So I'll just talk about it again, right? It's a process, right? This is a process. So it's so I throw out these concepts like radical responsibility, right? And this is not my concept. I read about it in a book, and I probably should know the book that I read it in so I can tell you guys, but I don't. So I'll have to look it up and put it in the show notes. But it was a concept that I read about, and I was like, I think that's really cool. And I think that goes to self-care, because when you take radical responsibility and then you are always feeling in control of what you can do next, what you can do next, what you can do next, the overall effect of that is that you stay in control, which makes you feel better overall. Instead
Absolutely.
of, in my example of the pool, being completely out of control, right? And which is now affecting relationships with my neighbors and my husband and my kid and myself, and affecting my sleep, because now I can't sleep, which obviously affects a lot of things in life. Just affecting my self-talk to myself, and all those things, like I shouldn't have been talking to that mom. I should have been just trained. I should have just been like staring at her the whole time. I shouldn't have even brought her over there. She's too little to be in the pool anyway. Why did I let her in the pool? Right? Like all these things, just like beating the crap out of myself, right? Taking radical responsibility eliminates all of that, because it's what can I do next? It's not what should I have done or should not have done. It's what can I do next, right? And what I could have done next is maybe removed myself and calm myself down, let her dad watch her, because he was not affected the same way I was, right? He thought I was a raving lunatic. As did all the neighbors.
More importantly, you thought you were a raving lunatic.
Yes, I thought I was. In the moment, I didn't care, but afterwards, I was like, "Yeah, I'm a raving lunatic." So that's what I mean when I say radical responsibility in terms of your self-care, because when you're in control of yourself, then you can make the next best choices for yourself. And that is what the self-care that we're talking about is all about. So that's how I think of it.
It's definitely a growth opportunity. And life will certainly throw those growth opportunities at you.
Yes, they will. So consider the idea, if you're listening to this and thinking, what in the world, like, how would I take responsibility for something that isn't even my fault? Right. Just be curious. If you were to take radical responsibility, what might you do? Just
what
think
might
about
it look
that.
like?
What might
what
it
might
look
it
like?
sound like? And what might it feel like?
Yeah. And you don't ever have to do it, but just consider the possibility and explore what might you do or think or feel if you took radical responsibility in your life.
Because even hindsight, that kind of reflection is going to help you find that space in the next situation. Next situation, like just taking the time to say, that podcast I was listening to, they were talking about this thing called, what was it? Radical responsibility. And in that moment, what might I have done to take radical responsibility? What might it have looked like? And would it have felt better? Mm-hmm. Would the outcome have been different? In would I have felt more in control and in my own power, I guess.
Right.
So,
and one last thing before we wrap this up, I will also say, I am a big word person, right? So if I don't like the way something sounds, I resist it. Right. I do. I resist it because I'm like, that's not the right term, right? And I'll like rack my brain for like, no, it should be this. This is what they're talking about, right? So if you don't like the term radical responsibility, that's fine. Call it something else. Call it whatever you need to. Like if you like the concept, but that phrase is kind of like, I don't like that.
Yeah.
Call it something else. Call it whatever you want, right? It doesn't matter. It's just the concept of it is what we're talking about. So
yeah,
I just wanted to throw that out there because I know myself. I get like that. It's like,
is Carrie rebellious? That could be another podcast.
I am a little. All right. All
Thank
right.
you, everybody.
We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to us if you like, subscribe, and share. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. This makes it easier for everyone to find us and helps us spread our message about self-care from the inside out. Have a wonderful week, and remember, making yourself the priority is the highest form of self-care.